Okay, so culture is our topic today. We have already dabbled in chapter 2 because we talked about ethnocentrism and cultural relativism at the end of our research discussion on during Monday's lecture. So today we are diving straight on in. We're not going to overlap chapters, at least not 1 and 2. We might talk a little bit about some of the topics from chapter 3, which is about learning culture. But for now, we need to know what this is before we go for any further, right? Okay, so culture. I'm not going to give you a long definition here and like written out in a sentence. I'm going to give you key words that I would need to see you use in a sentence of your own words if I asked you for a definition of culture. Okay, so there is a long sentence in the textbook, and my key words are going to come from that, and then other kinds of definitions of culture that I've made my own over the years. Okay, so culture. We always have to think of culture as being shared between members of a group. So there's a phrase, a bullet point phrase. You have to think of culture as being shared. What is shared? We're going to add more bullet points. Language. Knowledge.
Religion.
Beliefs. I'm going to be a little more macro scale. Religion, yes. Religion is a macro scale word, but let me just say beliefs in general, because that way it can encompass more than just religious type beliefs. It can encompass beliefs such as, I believe it's wrong to eat dog meat. Exactly, like we were talking about. Yes, so let's say beliefs. Oops, if I can. My coffee also makes my handwriting bad. Have y'all noticed that? It does. My handwriting gets better like toward the end of my second class for some reason after my coffee wears off. Anyway, so let's put beliefs on here. And yes, of course, if you want to, I suggest that you put examples like religions have beliefs. So beliefs are convictions that something is true without empirical evidence that it's true.
Morals fall
Ooh, we're going to talk about morals today, like the basis of where morals come from, like why do we think that this particular thing is correct or ethical compared to this particular thing. And another culture might say the opposite, right? Yeah. So, because, like, for instance, in our culture, we have definite ideas about the immorality, the wrongness of sexual activity with minors, right? I mean, could I have thought of a worse offense than that as an example? Maybe not. But what does the word minor mean? For our culture, a child is anybody under 18, right? But in India, for instance, halfway across the world, in India, it's very, very common for people at 12, 13, 14 to get married. And what's involved in marriage? Sexual activity, right? So, you see what I mean? So these kinds of convictions that something is correct or right. And what word did you just use, Max, that made me think of this? Morals, yes. Morality, thank you. See how distractible I am? That can come from the beliefs that are dominant in the culture where you live, right? Okay, so let's get some more bullet points for key terms and phrases here. Culture shared, it's made up of language. Add to language here that symbols are part of every culture. A symbol is anything meaningful that represents something else. And every word in our language is a symbol that represents something else. For instance, what's this word? Simple word. Learned it in first grade, right? Does this word look at all like the shape of this thing that we're in right now? But what is this thing that we're in right now? A room. Does this thing make any kind of noise that sounds like the way we pronounce this? No. You know, here's another word. Cat. Anybody know any other language words for cat? well, feline in English, but I meant like foreign language words for cat. Like gato and, here we go, yeah. That's the French word. And what is it in Japanese? I had somebody who was from Japan one time. Is this it in Japanese? Does anybody know this but me? I'm the only one who memorizes cat words from other languages? No? So do these look anything similar to each other? They all refer to the same little creature, though. And I know the word for room in French, it's chambre. Isn't that fancy of me to pronounce it like that? What is it in Spanish? Cuarto. Cuarto, okay. Okay, so look at this. Did I spell it correctly? It's a C at the beginning. See there? Okay, because you know why I got that wrong? Because I don't write Spanish, and when I hear the noise that she said, cuarto, how in English do we spell that noise? Exactly. So that noise symbolized something to me, and I wrote the wrong spelling on the board. Okay, thank you for correcting me. Okay, so all these different rooms, all these different words for room, we just agree that they symbolize what this thing is that we're standing in right now, or sitting in right now, respectively. Make sense? Every single word in language is a symbol. Okay, so shared language, knowledge, beliefs, customs. I'll also put with this traditions. How about the word ritual? Those are part of culture. What does ritual mean?
Just like a rite of passage kind of.
Okay.
Like baptism or.
Okay, there are some formal rituals, such as baptism or marriage that we were talking about a minute ago, or a rite of passage, as you're using a fancy phrase that some of us don't know about yet. Very good. But when I say, and the reason I asked about ritual is quite often we do think of, some kind of formal process where we follow specific rules and guidelines in order to come to a certain result, right? But here, when I use ritual, I want you to know that we should also include routines, things that we do. Sometimes you would say, or you'd use the word, oh, I do that religiously. Have you ever heard somebody say that before? It's very common. They do it repeatedly. It's maybe part of their, here's my air quotes again, normal day. So, for instance, let me tell you about my morning ritual. It always has to start with brushing my teeth. My whole day's thrown off if I can't do that first. And then I have to make sure the coffee's going, and then I have to make sure that this happens. Right? I have like this. It's all, I'm not as rigid as a checklist, but it kind of just. I'm trained. I've learned. My family members share this pattern also. Expected. It's routine. So a ritual is something that can be on the micro scale, just a very common thing that you do. Do you turn on the radio before you put on your seatbelt, or have you not turned the radio off at all before you got out of the car, right? So, customs, traditions, rituals, norms. We'll talk about norms a lot today. I know we have a very informal definition of norms already. I think we do. Am I right about that? What do we say norms mean? Don't use the same word in the definition. Norm, and I would say no, it's not something normal. I would say, it is the same root word.
Shared set of patterns.
Okay, a shared set of patterns. Okay, that would be social facts, right? Has the patterns with it. Okay, so I haven't given you just the quick and dirty little short definition of norms yet. Norms are social rules that we're supposed to follow. Social rules like, we'll talk more about this in a second, but tell me some of the social rules that people shared with you while you were growing up about table manners.
Don't put your elbows.
Oh, y'all all started with that one? Okay. Oh, is it? Okay. What's another one you learned? Do what? Oh, okay. That's a new one that I did not learn when I was growing up, because the phone in my day and age was like attached to the kitchen wall, and it was avocado green, and you had to stand there, and talk about it. So there wasn't a phone, but there's a new manners that your generation would need to learn. Mine was chew with your mouth closed. That was a big thing in my house. I guess all of us just talk a whole lot, and we didn't care if hamburger's gonna fall out, I guess. But like all of us was like, don't talk with food in your mouth, and the elbows on the table was a thing, and wiping your mouth on your napkin and not your sleeve, even though this works really fine, right? So norms have to do with rules that are expected in daily behavior. Some norms are more important than others for that stability of society that we talked about, as a functionalist looks for. I think that the society of the United States would not collapse if we started using our sleeve as as a napkin instead of the napkin itself. But some norms are really, really important. So important that we write them down. So important that we can use words like enforce these rules, right? And some norms are simply informal, like don't talk with food in your mouth. Yeah, like don't talk with food in your mouth. So we're going to spend a lot of time on norms, because this is also, Max, you were asking the question about morality. Morality kind of is a sub-bullet point underneath this one. That, of course, touches some of these other things like beliefs, like customs or traditions, those kinds of things. Okay, what have I left off here? So it's shared between members of a group. You have knowledge, symbols, language, belief, customs, traditions, rituals, norms. Aha! Material objects. Material things. What does that mean?
Like something that's important.
A possession, a physical thing. Yes, whoever said that, you're correct. Okay, so these things here, these are what's called non-material culture. Non-material culture. And material objects are called, guess what? Material culture. Yes, didn't take a big leap for that one, right? But good. Okay, so material culture. Yes, so non-material culture is something called, do you know this word, intangible? Oh, good. You have that good college level word. Okay, so tangible and intangible, these are not sociology specific words. They are just good college level common vocabulary words that would be a good idea for you to add to what you know. Okay? So some of us already know them. So what does intangible mean?
Something that you can't physically touch.
You cannot physically touch this. Love, you can't physically touch. Ideas, beliefs, knowledge, you can't physically touch. You can use knowledge to result in some kind of material outcome, like building a table or sharpening a knife or something like this. You can use knowledge to make material objects. But there are some material objects that are specific to one culture and not another. Such as?
Like, okay, like the Buddha statue.
Oh, okay. So we're like religious icons in general. Okay, so yeah, I think that I like that example. So maybe there are some objects that go along with your beliefs, religious icons in general, or do you all know what a menorah is? So the menorah is 8 candles that go along, and somebody help me with this because I'm not sure I get it all right. We'll have to ask Siri. It's 8 candles and you light one every night and have a different ritual or a different tradition each night, I believe. And I'm sure I'll get lots of emails from people who are watching this on YouTube.
Lighting the last candle too.
And there's something special about lighting that 8th candle, right? So yeah, I like that example because a menorah is something specific to what culture? Jewish faith, those who follow the Jewish faith. That's a good one. Absolutely. Or a Buddha statue is something that just might be something cute to put in my garden as a Christian. But to somebody else, it symbolizes something very different, not just a garden statue. I hope that's not disrespectful to use it as that, right? Okay, so material objects. What about chopsticks? Y'all know how to use chopsticks?
No.
You don't, not even like one piece of food to your mouth you tried? Do you know why you don't know how to use chopsticks? Do you know why, even if you do know how to use them, why it's so difficult? And sometimes you squeeze food across the room with the chopsticks is because no one shared that knowledge with us in our upbringing. No one put a set of chopsticks in our hands since we were 2 or however old you were when you first held your own spoon. Nobody stuck chopsticks in our hands, so we did not learn that custom. We did not learn the ritual, if you will, of using chopsticks, for instance. Did I tell you about my friend from Taiwan? In Taiwan, the only thing they don't eat,
Oh, yeah.
only thing with 4 legs they don't eat is a table. Yeah. We love to cook together, and she teaches me all kinds of, let me just say, in non-ethnocentric words, fun and interesting things that I might never repeat again in my household. It's just like a cultural experience when she teaches me some of the different ingredients. But she has this set of chopsticks. So when I say chopsticks, y'all probably think of, I think of like the short ones that you get at wherever. you get at the Kroger sushi counter if you pick them up at all. But she has this huge set, it's this long, I'm really not exaggerating, of big chopsticks that are attached with like a little string or a rope. It's like thicker than a string, but it's like a little tether together on the fat end. And she holds these things and can pick up, I'm not kidding, a whole roast beef with just these chopsticks. She holds it, she cuts it with that. She can pick up anything between a whole roast beef and one tiny grain of rice that happened to miss the pot that needs to go in there before everything else cooks, with these huge chopsticks. And she doesn't feel comfortable eating with a fork and a spoon. Well, she uses a spoon, but not the fork and the knife at the table because no one shared that knowledge, that skill, that custom, that tradition with her growing up. They threw chopsticks in her hand and did the same thing that you did with, that your parents did with you or that you do with your babies and say, come on, can you eat it? Or, airplane flying in or whatever, right? Whatever people do to get you to coax you to eat, right? So material objects can be specific to one culture and not next. It can identify you as a member of one culture and not the next, right? So it can create all of these kinds of things are the forces that create the us and the them that causes ethnocentrism to kind of bubble in us, okay? Let me see. One little last bullet point we need to talk about here before we take some of these apart and look at them more detailed. And that is that this is passed from one generation to another. It's passed from person to person and then from one generation to the next over time. So culture continues over time. From person to person, culture continues over time. Sorry, my hair was bothering me. Did y'all see the Cheetos commercial with MC Hammer? So think about he didn't write a song about something was intangible. He said you can't touch this. Right? So, can't touch this is what intangible means. And I failed to write the word tangible down here for material culture. Intangible, of course, means the opposite, which is you can touch it. It's a physical thing, like your book or my bottle of water or your cell phone that you're not supposed to touch in class because it's a rule, and then these markers or this board or a shirt, right? Tangible stuff. Okay, so we're going to have a fun discussion. I think it's kind of a fun discussion because let me just say that when I started teaching this, I didn't have any gray hair. So it's been a long time since I've been teaching this, and answers kind of change according to the generation of students who are in my classroom. But how many, is there one USA One, estado unidense culture, or many, or what? What do y'all think?
I think there's
Many?
one culture, but that many kind of go into it or are similar to it. You know, it's kind of
Okay.
one culture with a bunch of side cultures.
Okay, one culture with a bunch of side cultures. Let me give you a term for these side cultures. So we have culture, and then what you're talking about is something that we use a specific subculture. You got it. Somebody whispered it over there, and somebody said it louder. Yes, a subculture. What does sub mean?
Like substitutes, right?
Not
Second.
substitutes.
Like second?
Huh?
Category inside of it.
A category inside of. I like that. Yes, sub literally means like underneath something, like a submarine is under the sea, right? So sub is kind of, if you've got an umbrella that's a culture, like USA culture. And Logan was saying, I think there's a USA culture, but I think that there's other, would you say, side cultures within it. Now we have a particular vocabulary word, subculture. So subcultures are part of different categories of people. Different categories of people might have a variety of these bulleted point things on my list here. They might have a variety of these kinds of things that identify them as part of a larger group, but distinctive among the rest of the people in that category. And I want to make sure we did talk about what categories of people are in our notes. We did. We defined that. So what does it mean? What's a category mean?
Huge numbers of people across the population who share similar life experiences because they have similar characteristics.
Thank you, Des. Yes. It is a large number of people, or if I put huge number of people, yes, it's a large number of people across a population, and they share similar social characteristics. Therefore, they have similar life experiences. You can think of a subculture like that, and the differences that exist from one subculture to the next, one category of people to the next, the differences come in because language might be slightly different. Symbols might be slightly different. Knowledge of how to arrive at things or education level might be slightly different. Skill set might be slightly different. Beliefs might be slightly different or majorly different in some cases, right? Customs, traditions, etc. Keep on going down this list. There might be differences between one category of people or subculture to the next. But as Logan said, taken collectively, have y'all heard of this melting pot idea? What's that melting pot idea mean?
The cultures or different cultures all kind of come together to create one culture.
Where?
From
In what country? I'm sorry, I'm asking this question very poorly. I'm kind of going backwards to get information from you. Yes, so let me rephrase all of that. Y'all are correct, but I kind of started in the middle of where I wanted my question to go. Okay, in the United States, have you heard of this culture being called a melting pot, or have you heard of another one, the tossed salad? You've heard both of those before. So our culture in the United States is a melting pot. What happens when you melt stuff together? It mixes all together. It's easy to mix, right? And then you end up with you started out with a whole bunch of ingredients and you melted them together, you stir it together, and it looks like one thing after that. With a tossed salad, what happens?
The same thing.
You're mixing together, but can you still see the tomatoes and the onions and the cucumbers and the lettuce, and you can still see all the differences, right? Okay, so in the United States, some people say we're a melting pot where everybody is coming together, and I might have a different belief than you and you, but over time, this shared culture, the larger culture, kind of smooths out the differences between us. Remember when we talked about the education system as a social institution? What does the education system do as a social institution in our culture? You can look in your notes. Your test will be open notes also. You'll be doing it at home. So get practiced looking at your notes for where we've talked about this.
So frankly,
The education system does what as a
Transmit knowledge,
It-
culture, and awareness.
Ooh, there she's found it. It transmits knowledge, it transmits culture, it transmits ideas among a whole bunch of group of people. I look out here and I don't know really anything about your background other than you all came to this sociology class from different belief systems, different family structures, different political backgrounds, different, am I right about this? Would you expect each other to have different points of view about lots of different things on this list? But this education system that we're participating in, it can transmit larger ideas about culture that you didn't maybe get in your upbringing or in your elementary school or different things like this. Do y'all know the Pledge of Allegiance? You do? Did your mama teach it to you? No? Why didn't mama teach it to you? Because we do it at school, right? So the education system, that culture, transmitting knowledge, yes, transmitting ABC and 1, 2, 3, yes. But how many of y'all in elementary school made the turkey hand thing? At what time of year? Oh, Thanksgiving. Is that a holiday all across the globe? No, it's not. It's a holiday in the United States. And do all of us necessarily, in our micro-scale example of family, do all of us necessarily practice or observe the tradition of Thanksgiving within our individual households?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I know, it's hard to believe, huh? It's hard to believe. But no, not all of us necessarily, when I say turkey and dressing, what holiday do you think of?
Thanksgiving.
Why not the 4th of July?
Because it's hot dogs.
Oh, okay, she's going to make sure I know what the norm is for that tradition, right? So, yeah, the education system can it kind of takes people from lots of different subcultures within the United States, and it sort of serves as a way to maybe get us used to each other at least get us used to each other. But sometimes maybe like smooth out some of the differences. If I didn't know the song God Bless America from, my house watching some movie that it was sung in, do I learn it at school? The Star Spangled Banner or Grand Old Flag or these kinds of things are not the songs that Grandma sings us to sleep with. But how do we know them? From that cultural education that we get in the school system. Okay? Questions? No, everything's clear? Okay. All right, while I'm erasing, please ask me a question if something comes up or make a comment. Ew. I'm going to stop erasing for a second because I actually want to ask you. Yeah, okay. Let me ask you some questions about subcultures and language for just a second. Okay, so language is a symbol. It's a set of symbols. Like all those different words for cat, all represent a cat. Okay? Can different subcultures of people be part of the same larger culture that exhibit, or how am I trying to ask this? I'm trying to say, can they demonstrate what their subculture is through differences in language, yet their language is the same language that everybody in culture speaks? Ask that.
Like dialects and stuff.
Dialect, thank you. I was trying to go I was a little too far around that word, a dialect. What does dialect mean?
Different slang.
The type of, the slang that you might use, the different, like pronouncing words. So my mother and her family are from Rhode Island. Do y'all know where that is? It's way, yes, and you go like this. It's way up north, yes. And so to me, when I interact with her kinfolk, number one, they don't say kinfolk. They don't say that word. I kind of grew up with that word. It's fine with me. But they tell me, I don't know, do y'all think I'm cute when I say kinfolk? They do. Right? And they ask me, just talk. We just want to hear you talk. Just say anything because I talk differently than them. And when I'm there visiting them, I'm like, you're the one who talks different from me. Right? I'm ethnocentric about your pronunciation. So just the dialect, the slang that you choose to use, the pronunciation of words, saying y'all as opposed to you guys.
Yeah, when I was in California, I told them y'all, and then my cousins were like, no, it's you guys. I'm like,
No, it's y'all. Let's have a fight about it.
And then when I first came, they're like, just keep talking. You talk so country. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Exactly, yes. And
What
so,
are you talking about?
okay, I'm glad that you mentioned these biases in language too. What page is this? Get out your book if you have it with you. Let me see, I'll tell the online students what page we're on. Yeah, page 44 of chapter 2. Let me see, does it start the page before? Actually, it starts on page 43, but look at page 44, the section on language, race, ethnicity, language, and gender. And in the case, Veronica, that you were talking about, it's kind of like language or pronunciation and the ethnocentrism that we can have associated with maybe what our education level is, or whether we're country versus city, or those kinds of things. We can use language as a marker for derogatory words, for insults, for compliments, for who and what people symbolize in the world. Y'all look, for instance, it tickles me because I like this book. I like this book a lot. You can tell I've used it a lot, huh? It's coming apart. But this lady who wrote it shows her age, I think, when she, on the bottom of page 44, says that derogatory terms for a female include things like fox and broad, and what's the next one? Oop, bitch is actually in print in this book, okay? And let's see, babe and doll and those kinds of things. I don't know what era that would be. Brad, do you know what? Like when fox? I know you're not that old. I'm not that old either. I'm asking you. I'm asking you just in case. Like, I don't know, is that from maybe the 1950s when they would call a woman a fox? And of course it had a sexual overtone to it, right? Yeah, so, and then what are the ones that it says for a guy? A dude, a stud, or a hunk? Do y'all use those words?
No.
Not anymore?
Just
Dude, but it doesn't mean like a,
Casual.
it's more,
You call everybody.
Stud means something different for us now.
what does stud mean differently for y'all now? You mean your age group?
I mean, like a girl that just like a boy. I don't want to say
It's like a boy. A girl just like a boy.
Oh, okay, so it's about like gender identity. It's about, okay, so stud is not something for a man who has a lot of sexual partners. Okay, that's what it used to be.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what it used to be. I mean, that's what this, the author of this textbook is telling you, right? That there are some words that have these sexual overtones. Some of my students told me a couple semesters ago, let me see, that words that have sexual overtones for males these days are things like a snack or lunch. It's like food words. Is that not right? I mean, are my students lying to me? Is it right? Okay.
It's not much.
So not, it's like it's only a snack. It's not a dinner or something.
It's male.
Okay, male or female can be that. Okay. So you see some of these examples. Sorry. Okay, so some of these examples are old-fashioned, okay? Because the lady who wrote this textbook has more gray hair than I do. But we can modernize it with what your terms are, with what your ideas are, and see that we haven't really changed much. The words have changed, but the way that we use them or categorize people or, you know, who symbolizes what, has it changed really that much? Not really that much. The words have changed, but maybe not really that much. Some of my students taught me some texting words too that aren't really words except you're texting, and y'all have some really dirty words in text that I did not know about. I see you're guilty, aren't you? Yes. So anyway, language changes. It can identify you as a group. It doesn't just have to be what your accent is or whether your cousin thinks you sound country compared to what, I don't know. But language can really symbolize a lot in the way, just as we pass by and we hear someone say things that are similar or different than what we expect, and we can like create our reality, to use a symbolic interactionist phrase, from the interpretations that we make of language and symbols.
Does that like also include when people call a certain item different things when they're from different places? Like,
Oh yeah.
like I have a cousin from Iowa, and they don't call shopping carts buggies. thinks that's the weirdest thing ever.
What does she call a shopping?
It's called shopping carts.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that,
not
that
a
would
buggy.
also, yes, you're absolutely right, Mackenzie. And what the question was for you online students was does it also include like different vocabulary words for the same thing? So in Iowa, it's not a buggy at Walmart, it's just a cart.
Yeah.
And what about for in the South when somebody asks for a Coke?
Maybe,
Yeah.
some of them actually talking like a Coke with
Or a
some
pop.
people
Yeah,
like
so
Coke
so like if we, but in the South, I've noticed that if we say, oh, let's go get a Coke, you might end up with a Sprite, and I might end up with an iced tea, but we went to get a Coke, you know. And then what is it? A pop is what's used in where, like Michigan or something, and then soda is maybe, I don't know, in another region, right? So and then a friend of mine from North Carolina does not vacuum her house; she hoovers her house.
Hoover.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah.
Like the vacuum?
Yeah, it's like a brand of vacuum, but we do the same thing with the word Kleenex.
Oh yeah, because Kleenex is just the thing.
Because it might I need a Kleenex, but you take a Puffs out of the box, right? And so we use that word. So yeah, it's interesting. I love to look at language and how you people change words from one generation to the next, and tweet and shorten things so you can fit everything you want to say in your tweet. You know, it can be a cultural identity kind of marker, the language that we use. Okay, good. And food too, huh? Food is a cultural marker too. My mother did, when she moved to the South, did not know what cornbread was. I'd never had it. Can you imagine? But that's another story. Okay, so let's look at some of these things more in depth, okay? And since we're going to talk about norms so much, and since we are going to talk about, or since we already have talked about them many times, let's get a more detailed definition, and I'm even going to draw you a picture, which doesn't happen very often, but I'm going to draw you a picture that you can use to kind of represent. Look at me using a symbol that's going to represent the definition of the word norms. Okay, so norms are social rules about expected appropriate behavior, but also on the flip side, unexpected, unacceptable, inappropriate behavior. Okay, so it's both sides. It's a coin here. So it's social rules about acceptable, appropriate behavior. Flip side, also unacceptable, inappropriate. Okay, let's add something to this. Acceptable, inappropriate behavior is one thing, but could ideas be acceptable or appropriate or unacceptable? Yeah, so we can also say acceptable or appropriate ideas, attitudes, acceptable or appropriate or inappropriate is bless you. See that norm? Say bless you after. There's expected behavior, right? Say something, Gesundheit or something, right? So acceptable, appropriate behavior, acceptable, appropriate ideas, acceptable or appropriate or expected conditions. You are expected to be the appropriate thing in society today. Your status of college student is what you're supposed to be, and you are following that norm, as I can see. 8 o'clock class on Monday and Wednesday. Y'all are above and beyond the expectation for college students. Unacceptable, inappropriate. I made this 2 words and it's not. Inappropriate, sorry. Squish it together in your notes. So unacceptable, inappropriate behavior. We can put ideas, attitudes, conditions. Reaction, yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's inappropriate to laugh when someone's had a wreck. Right? Like that's not an appropriate emotional response, right? And we are going to think of you as odd or bad or whatever, right? But Yes, rude or whatever. Something is wrong with you, we would say, perhaps. Because these norms, we have learned these norms. Do what? So at certain situations, yeah. Certain situations is appropriate. So norms, of course, are things that we learn in our upbringing. Chapter 3 is going to be all about how and why we know, as social scientists, that we learn stuff through our upbringing. Babies are not born with that cultural knowledge we were just talking about. Babies aren't born knowing how to speak, for instance, knowing how to use language in the way we know how to use language. They have to learn that. They have to learn the accent. They have to learn hoovering compared to vacuuming, right? They have to learn those differences. Okay? So, did your hand go up? Yeah.
So what about like, I don't know if this would fall in the one, but like, when you go to movie theaters, there's one person you don't know and sit by any other person in the movie theater.
Yes. Those informal norms, yes, we're going to talk about those kinds of things. Yeah, so you keep like a distance. It would be, or even getting in an elevator. You know, it's not just a movie theater where you have all this space. It would be odd. I'm in the movie theater and you come in and sit right by me when you have like 37 other seat choices.
Yeah.
Yes, wacko, right? You know, that's what we would expect. You're a very nice person, but that's what we would assume. Because of that. Or like the elevator, right? You get on an elevator, or are you supposed to strike up a conversation about each other's grandmother's ailments? No, not at all. You are supposed to say maybe the expected behavior is maybe floor 3, please. If you even say it as completely a sentence as that, right? So yeah, norms can be very informal, like you're talking about, Mackenzie, or like my example, or they can be very formal. And they can be not so important for overall social structure and continuation, or they can be vital to the idea of culture continuing over time. Yeah, so we've got some nuances like that to look at here. Okay, so yes, so before we look at those nuances, let's look at kind of the flips. It's not a flip side of this, but it's a word that you should always associate. It's a concept that you should always associate with norms. Because I just told you that none of us are born knowing anything about the norms for our particular social circle, right? You learn all of it. So how would you learn the difference between what's acceptable in your social circle or what's unacceptable in your social circle? We need a way to talk about that academically with sociology words. And it's called, I need a new marker. And it's called a sanction. And just like I was just telling Mackenzie that norms can be formal or informal, sanctions are going to be, are going to cover that range also. A sanction is a reaction to a behavior, an idea, or condition that communicates whether it's acceptable or whether it's unacceptable. So a sanction is a punishment if I want you not to do that again. Or it's a reward, like you're a good boy, I'm going to get you an ice cream cone if you did appropriate things that I want you to repeat going forward. Okay? So a sanction, it's a reaction to behavior that communicates whether behavior is acceptable or unacceptable. So it's a reward or it's a punishment. Think of it that way. It can be formal or it can be informal. There are rules, for instance, against plagiarism and cheating, right? So in the syllabus, I have specific sanctions listed. Hey, if you do this, this, and this, this is what will result. So I've got a norm spelled out. In this class, you will have academic integrity. You will do your own work because I'm interested in your brain and your brain and your brain. And any old person can look up something on Google and copy it, right? So I have that norm. That's my expected behavior. Not just me, right? I'm not alone in that. Teachers in general, there's a code of student conduct that I got this idea from, so I stuck it in my syllabus. And I've got the sanctions listed there too, if it has to happen. It doesn't have to happen often, and I don't expect it. But I've got it written there, right? We got some rules. So sometimes there are punishments to reinforce those rules. Who knows the word for this in criminal justice? The word for a sanction in criminal justice?
Penalization.
Well, it's a penalty. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of like a word to try to prevent you. The knowledge of sanctions can sometimes prevent people from doing something wrong. I want to do this, but I know that it's not acceptable, and there's some kind of punishment that will happen to me if I get caught, for instance. And so the word that I'm looking for here is deterrent. Heard that word before? A deterrent. It's going to make you think twice, stop, and not do it. Sanctions are kind of like that. And that's how. Do what?
Would a law be?
A law is a type of norm in general. A law is a very formal norm that's written down. We're going to talk about the 3 types of norms in just a second. Morality is going to be part of one of them. And table manners is going to be part of another one. Right? But laws are types of norms where we have very clearly this is what the rule is, and we also have subsequently have very clearly written sanctions that go along with it. So there's a jaywalking rule. Y'all know what jaywalking is? And walking like outside the crosswalk. Yeah, you cross the street or you're walking in the street anywhere. Yeah, so one of my students one time was in the river market downtown in Little Rock, where it's very pedestrian, right? Like people are walking everywhere. And she got a ticket for jaywalking. So jaywalking, in your mind, do you think of that as a serious crime or a serious law violation? So, multiple choice question. Does it make sense to you that jaywalking would have a night in jail, a $500 fine, or a $25 fine? $25? That's what she got. Because jaywalking, so in other words, when we have laws written down, we've got to have sanctions that match them, or there's like displeasure, right? Like we would be very unhappy if I told you she would spend the night in jail for jaywalking. You'd say, no, she had to do something else. Did she kick him in the shin when he she had to do something else. Did she assault the officer? No, jaywalking. In the river market in Little Rock, where all those...
Downtown?
Yeah, like where all the restaurants and nightclubs and stuff are. Yeah, she's like everybody walks down there. Yeah, and North Little Rock, yeah, like North Little Rock has a similar place, like right across the river. Yeah, so there are all different kinds of norms. We've already hit on some of them, but I haven't drawn you my picture yet. So I've got to draw you my picture before we talk about the 3 types of norms. Okay, get ready for some beautiful artwork. And y'all can take a picture of it on your phone if you'd like it for posterity, or copy it down in your notes, because it might help you, if you're a visual person, it might help you remember this definition of norms to be able to talk about it in your essay questions. Okay, so I've erased everything but the word norms, because here's my picture. So there's a line, and there's different portions of this line. And this side, we will say this is the unacceptable behavior side. Unacceptable, inappropriate things are over here. We have acceptable. We have appropriate things over here. Well, why do I have this middle section?
Things that you're not so sure about.
This is my uncertainty section. You can gray this out. You can put a great big question mark here. Why do we need an uncertainty section?
Because we're unhealthy.
There's one reason, because like we said, a melting pot or the tossed salad, whichever metaphor you prefer, things are always changing. So things that used to be over here might be over here now, and things that are in here, we won't ever know, do they go here or do they go there unless we try them. What'd you say, Emmanuel?
I was gonna say change.
Same thing? Yeah. So let me tell you what I got in my mailbox. It's not last summer, it's like 2 summers ago. I got a flyer that was asking me to sign a petition so that the government, the state government of Arkansas, would fund a meat inspector for horse meat to be sold in places like Kroger and Walmart and stuff. Oh, I hear ethnocentric reactions. Woo! Right? But that was my reaction too, right? Ethnocentrism is part of everyday life. But yes, I was like, ew, I had to read it more carefully. Was I really reading this? Why did that stick out? Like where was eating horse meat within my picture here of norms? It's in here, right? Horse meat is, let me just say, horse meat is edible. Lots of cultures across the world, including European culture, eats horse meat regularly, even still today. It's not just because of food shortages. Horses are native to Europe. It's where they evolved. And it's eaten all over the place. Donkey is eaten. I think we talked about guinea pigs the other day, eating that in Peru and Colombia, and what else did we talk about? Different kinds of foods. Yes. So anyway, how will we know if a behavior that's in this gray area should be here according to our cultural values and norms, or should be here according to our values and norms? We have to try it, right? How does a little kid learn what the rules of the house is? They do it. They're constantly testing the water, and what are they waiting for?
Somebody to let us know.
Use your that's what they're waiting for, but you now have a sociology word that goes with that. A sanction. Excellent. Yes, the little kid is waiting for their sanction. You can teach your 3-year-old that word. Mama, would I get a sanction if I do blah blah blah? Oh yes. Right? Give him that word. Sanction. Yes, so it maybe sounds a little less forceful than punishment, right? But it can be a punishment if they do something over here that you want them to always remember, never do it again. Okay? It can be a reward if they do something over here that you want them to repeat. It can be a reward or a punishment if they do something in here and you don't know until right then when they do it whether it goes here or whether it goes here. Right? Okay. So, here's my picture I drew. I won't always give you artwork, but you're welcome. And this is a great big range. Like over here, you can maybe draw a circle around here, and you can overlap a circle in the middle, and you can put a circle over here, because norms, rules for norms, behavior possibilities, attitude possibilities, belief possibilities can be all over the place, right? All over, in that wide range. And when my belief and idea about what is correct and acceptable is here, and your belief and idea about what's correct and acceptable is over here, because of ethnocentrism, is it possible that we still might not accept each other? Yeah, because even though you're within like U.S. culture says it's okay, and I'm within like U.S. culture says it's okay, if you're really, really different and far away from me, we still might think, you might think, oh, I'm here, and I might think that about you. Does that make sense? Okay, so, before my picture gets any uglier, does anybody want to take a photo of it? Yeah, if you will take a photo of it and then email it to me so I can, or text it to me, I'll put it online for folks, although I think the camera maybe is getting it okay. You have to get me in the picture. Okay. Can I erase it?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's talk about those there's 3 norms that at least people on this side of the room have already been wanting to talk about, since we already mentioned morality, we already mentioned laws. There are 3 types of norms. The first type is the kind of norm that has like those table manner things in it that we were talking about. It's called Folkways. One word, it's called Folkways. It just means common everyday behaviors, common everyday things.
You know, like when your parents like say don't sit with your legs open.
Oh yes, girls get that.
Yeah, like don't open your legs.
Do females, any male in here ever have their parent or somebody who's like guiding them in life tell them to sit with their legs together? No, that's a gender norm. So that's like even more complicated, right? So that's another reason why we have to have those great big ranges on that norm line and within that, because in our upbringing, females are taught different things than males are taught, right? So yes, it would be a folkway for someone to teach you not only that none of us, male or female, need to have our elbows on the table, but the appropriate way to sit. Or anybody ever told you how to stand up straight?
Yes.
Or to shake a hand in a certain way? These kinds of things. How can you eat your French fries? With your fingers? Right? That's perfectly acceptable, common everyday behavior. What about your mashed potatoes? With a spoon or a fork. Why not fingers? It's made out of the same stuff. It's like a different preparation. I mean, you can eat, let me just tell you, I've witnessed it many times. It's easy to eat your mashed potatoes with your finger. Not appropriate though, right? So this kind of thing, folkways. Are you supposed to slam a door in somebody's face who's coming in the room behind you? No, manners and stuff like this. The folkways do what? Okay. If you are trying to communicate something, we can communicate messages with our actions. So let me finish this. So folkways are common everyday behaviors that, in the grand scheme of things, would society crumble or change significantly if all of us decided it's okay to eat your mashed potatoes with your fingers? No. So it's common everyday behaviors that really aren't so vital in the grand scheme of things. You go out on a first date, a man and a woman, who pays?
The man.
But nowadays.
Notice it was the females who answered that, y'all. The females who answered that question in the way that they answered it.
They better pay for it.
Okay. Oh, they better. Golly. They better pay for it, she said. Okay, so see, now we're a little bit like maybe some guys in the room are like, I disagree with them, but I ain't saying it out loud, right?
I mean, we can pay for it, but we don't have to pay for it all the time.
But I'm saying whoever asks you want to date.
So split it. I mean, that's far too reasonable to go over max. That's far too reasonable. So it's never going to work. Okay, so folkways are common everyday behavior. I just told you that they are not very controversial things, but I guess you immediately proved me wrong, right? Immediately. Okay? So, but in other words, if someone as reasonable as Max, who says, why don't you just split it, could actually take that idea and make it a macro scale trend across the board, that would still be a folkway, right? It's not. So I say that folkways are like not so big, not so significant, but we will still fight about it. We'll still fight about it. I'm going to use a food example because I love food examples. But there was a TV show, I don't think it's still on, it's been like 10 years ago, and the name of it was Hillbilly Hand Fishing. Have y'all ever seen that show? Y'all know what noodling is? Catching catfish like with your bare hands? I think that's a white man thing, I think. I'm not sure. But I don't know. It was a whole bunch of folks from the South. Well, am I right? I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm wrong about lots of stuff. Yes, sir.
I have family who does it, and they are very white. So.
Yes, I have this, maybe it's an untrue bias, but I think that it might be. So anyway, so tell me how you do it. You wade in water.
They go in the riverbank, and what you use is you pretty much use your hand as bait, and you stick your hand in
Yeah.
Don't they bite?
Yes, they bite you. Yes, Veronica. That's why. Yes, they bite you, and that's how you say. That's how you like pull them out, and they're attached to your whole arm. It's like a 60-pound catfish or something. Yeah. So anyway, there was a show where these guides, these hunting guides, taught people how to do this. And the particular show I saw had some folks from New York State and some folks from like Alabama or something. And then they all learned how to do it. Everybody was happy. And at the end of the show, the Alabama group was going to cook their catfish as a dinner for the New York folks. And the New York folks were going to cook their catfish as a dinner for the, yeah, I thought it was nice, except that's when Folkways got in the way. Because how are we going to cook it in Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, these places? How are we going to cook it? Amen. Hush puppy. Yeah. We're going to fry it. We're going to toss it in cornmeal and fry that stuff. And we're going to fry like 7 other things with it. Right? Okra and coleslaw we're going to have, and hush puppies, all these different kinds of things, right? So the New York folks heard about how the Alabama folks were fixing it and started saying, what? That's why everybody's fat in Alabama. That's why everybody's got heart disease in Alabama. That's why this is bad in Alabama and this is bad in Alabama and all this diabetes and da-da-da-da-da. And so the camera crew said, well, how are you fixing your catfish? Anybody want to take a guess? Do what? They baked it with like little pieces of lemon on it. It was like, I mean, it sounds good to me, but is that the way you expect Grandma to give you a catfish dinner? No. And so the Southern folks heard about how the, let me say an ethnocentric word, the Yankees were cooking the catfish, right? And they weren't happy about that either. Like, why are you going to ruin a catfish by putting lemon on it and baking it, right? So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they didn't care about the health aspect of it. That didn't enter their mind. But folkways are common everyday things that are not so important in the grand scheme of things, but we will still fight about it because humans don't need good reasons to fight with each other. Okay? Ethnocentrism just kind of makes it happen. What'd you say? Oh, so rude, like social behavior, just like in public, they're rude? Compared to us, I mean, I'm saying compared to us, for you people on the internet, like, so they're talking about like different social behaviors in public. Okay, so let me give you the last 2 here, because yeah, I think we don't have very much time left. Let me give you the last 2 on the list. Folkways is the first one. The second one, Max, this goes with what you were asking me for earlier about morality. Mores is this word. Mores. I think this word is this word singular and plural, Brad? Yeah, I think you can use this singular and plural. Yeah. So it's just like one word, but mores is how you pronounce it. Okay, and this is behavior, attitudes, ideas based on our concepts of right and wrong. Based on a value system, based on right versus wrong in a morality sense. These are more serious. We see in any culture, any society, mores exist, and mores are more serious than folkways. We see them, and so the sanction that you would get for violating mores would be more serious. So for instance, if you're married in this culture, how many spouses are you supposed to have?
One.
Just one. Y'all didn't even hesitate. All of you answered. None of you are from the same household. You're not siblings, but you all learned that in your socialization process, right? When we hear about other cultures that don't agree with that and say that this spouse can have multiple spouses, is this an issue that is addressing folkways, or is this an issue that's kind of touching on this? That, okay. Y'all agree? Kind of touching on this? Yeah. And even when people are dating, do we expect people to be exclusive or faithful? Fidelity rules? Faithfulness in relationships? Yeah. And so these kinds of things are mores. Maybe that, there was a debate one time, some of my students asked me about that horse meat thing. I was telling people about that horse meat thing I got in the mail when it happened. And we had a debate whether eating horse meat was a violation of folkways in our culture or a violation of mores in our culture? We couldn't decide. What do you think? Eating,
I
say
said
folkways?
more.
What about you? You say mores? So, well, I mean, the reason the debate started was because some people were like, it's wrong to eat your pet, and they classified a horse as a pet.
So I was
Yeah.
I mean, I've never had a pet horse, but
They were still transportation devices. Like, you know what I'm trying to say.
you mean back when I was born? Yes.
You still use it to transport. Like, I think it would be more for more.
Oh yes. See, you're hitting on a very key point in history. You're using cultural relativism, excellent, because you're looking at historical background. And so historically, this nation and other nations have used horses as vital components for military expansion, like how the West was won kind of thing, transportation, right? And so we used to rely on horses as vital transportation, right? And so maybe if that was still the case, he's saying maybe it would be here. But
But I mean, it's still wrong. I mean, I feel like it's still wrong. 'Cause I mean, I see it as a
yeah,
lot
so
of
if you
bad.
think about that, if you see something or witness something and your response is that's so wrong, are you saying wrong on a morality sense, like it's wrong from a religious rule sense, or is it just wrong from like eating French fries with your fingers compared to mashed potatoes with your spoon? So anyway, we don't have time apparently to talk about laws today, but we will start with that when? Monday, right? I won't see you again until Monday. So we will start with that on Monday and finish chapter 2 on Monday. You will get your announcement for when the test is due on Monday, and you will also get project 1, where you're going to watch a movie and talk to me about it. Okay, so I will see you then. And thank you, online students, for your attention.